Hi there, and welcome to another episode of 411 Pop Culture, where real people talk about really everything. I'm your host, Justin Steele, and tonight we're going to be doing another Twin Peaks theory video. And this one we're going to be talking about what happened to Maddy Ferguson. One of the best parts about David Lynch and Mark Frost's saga of Twin Peaks is being able to compound theory upon theory. While we have to wait possibly forever for Lynch to return to the town of Twin Peaks to have any definite answers, which will surely only lead to more questions, there are certain assumptions we can only make. If time has truly changed, as evidenced by Pete finally going fishing and new residents in the Palmer home, then what happened to Maddy Ferguson? Now, before I begin, I do want to clarify that I know that Maddy was created specifically for David Lynch to utilize Sheryl in the show more. He was impressed with her acting ability and created the character of Maddy so she could show off that ability on the show. Nevertheless, over time, Maddy could come to represent something else entirely. So in making a theory video about Maddy, I already know what her original purpose was regarding Twin Peaks. Now, I did not want to do a prolonged introduction to this video. I wanted to jump right in. However, something happened between my planning for this episode and the actual filming of this episode. I watched Twin Perfect's video called Twin Peaks Actually Explained, parentheses, no really. And I think he is mostly right. Maybe even completely right. Certainly it is a brilliant thesis if nothing else. For those of you who have not seen it yet, it is a 4.5-hour YouTube video explaining the meta aspects of all things Twin Peaks. And to be honest, I think that he is brilliant, mostly right, but it kind of left me feeling empty, which I kind of suppose is exactly the point that the video, and if he is right, that Twin Peaks and David Lynch is trying to make. You know, the video goes on to talk about once a mystery is solved, there's nothing more to tell. That's the end of the story. Once you have all the answers, the mystery no longer exists, only emptiness. And so much of what he had to say makes sense, but long story short, Twin Peaks is primarily David Lynch, not so much Mark Frost's, attempt to balance good and evil in a television show. Everything in the show can be seen as a result of Lynch's feelings and reactions to the studio's and audience's feelings and reactions. Now, obviously it's way more in-depth, but those are the general broad strokes. The murder of Laura Palmer was a mystery that was never supposed to be solved. And it's true that once it was answered, the series did sort of decline in the ratings and ultimately was canceled. So what Twin Perfect goes on to say is that utilizing different characters, settings, Judy, etc., Lynch used his transcendental beliefs to weave a story. There is no real mystery. All of the answers are already there. Again, it all makes sense that I can tell. I'm sure any one of us could go back later and see a mistake, maybe not. But one flaw that I do see is that there are movies and TV shows that we love. And a lot of us have a lot of favorite movies or shows that we go back to watch time and time again. There's no mystery left because we know how a favorite book or movie or whatever is going to end, yet we come back to it because we love it, because it means something to us and rekindles something in us, even if it is a mystery story. And the other side of it is that, that video primarily focused on the David Lynch aspect, but Mark Frost does count too. And Mark Frost, while it's David Lynch's artistic visual that definitely draws us in, what keeps us going are these characters, and that's more Mark Frost's aspect of it. The storytelling, the mythology, obviously he's written all these books about it. They've both said that you can't really tell where one begins and one ends, but obviously, Lynch leans towards more the visual and Mark Frost towards the storytelling. And if I remember correctly, Twin Perfect's video is detailing more what he thinks David Lynch was trying to do with the show. And again, he's probably right. Certainly, it's a brilliant and well thought out analysis. However, the storytelling is just as important. the story, the characters. So that all being said, I think it's just one layer of truth. But there's all this in-universe stuff, and I have to believe that all of this is more than just a meta-examination of what David Lynch thinks about the television landscape of 1990 and 2017. I am 100% certain that it is true to an extent, and I'm sure that it did influence Mr. Lynch. But there is a whole nother side to Twin Peaks. And so, back to this episode, and back to the in-universe mythology of the series. And what I want to know is what happened to Maddy Ferguson in the new timeline. I mean, Laura Palmer was no longer killed in the boxcar. Evidently, she went missing instead. Well, did her look-alike cousin Maddy from Missoula, Montana, still come to stay with the Palmers? Leland did not commit suicide until a year after Laura's disappearance. How does this change the timeline for Maddy? For it was her death in the original series that put Dale Cooper and Sheriff Truman eventually on the trail of Leland Palmer. In the credits for Twin Peaks: The Return, Maddy Ferguson is listed and is played by Sheryl Lee. Or it was. It's no longer listed, at least on Wikipedia, but when I first looked on there and saw the cast list, this is back before the show premiered, it said Sheryl Lee, Laura Palmer, / Maddy Ferguson. I have always wondered if one of the many quote-unquote Lauras that we see in the Black Lodge in The Return is actually supposed to be Maddy. Obviously, none of them have her dark hair, so I find that unlikely. She did, however, appear in the Black Lodge in the Season 2 finale, warning Dale to watch out for her cousin. So she has made an appearance in the Black Lodge. She was not given the owl ring, so it would be tricky to understand how she would end up in the Black Lodge, but that does not make it impossible. There are still so many things we do not know about the owl ring, the Black Lodge, the White Lodge, etc. But what if she is in there before the change in time? Here's what we know about Maddy Ferguson. She shares the same hometown as series creator David Lynch, which is Missoula, Montana. Maddy is 4 years older than Laura, but with the exception of her dark hair and glasses, is identical in appearance. The two cousins often pretended they were sisters, and after Laura's death, Maddy arrives in Twin Peaks to comfort her Aunt Sarah and Uncle Leland. She becomes involved with two of the people closest to Laura in the good side of her life, which would be James and Donna. For, like the dualism that is prevalent in Lynch's work, Laura had two sides one could categorize as light and dark. Maddy is herself a dual image of Laura. She is, however, likely what Laura would have been had Laura not been abused by Bob via her father Leland. She befriends James and Donna. She joins the two in the detective work of discovering what happened to her cousin. The longer Maddy stays in Twin Peaks, the more the town and residents begin to affect her. She starts to appear more like Laura, and the detective triangle she forms with James and Donna resurrects the sort of love triangle between James, Donna, and Laura. Only now with Maddy. The conflicting feelings she had from this instigates her desire to return back to her home. Unfortunately, this leads to her inevitable confrontation with Leland Palmer, or Bob. And for me personally, to see the most horrifying moment that I have ever seen on primetime TV. To be clear, I am a big horror fan. I write for Wicked Horror, I grew up with horror movies, and this moment scared the hell out of me. The music, the moment, the lighting, everything. I suppose a factor in this was that I watched the original series for the first time in about 2010. It was very unexpected for me to see something released in the early 90s on primetime ABC that would actually scare me, let alone terrify me. While Cooper and other residents affected by Laura Palmer's mystery sit frozen at the roadhouse while Julie Cruz sings and then the giant or fireman speaks the iconic words, "It is happening again," we watch the scene unfold in the Palmer house. Sarah has been drugged and sees the white horse. Leland is transforming into Bob in the mirror. Maddy runs in, questioning if something is burning. Maddy and Bob's eyes meet, and she screams in horror. Leland darts towards her with his hands terrifyingly stretched out. As she continues to scream, Leland Bob is ruthless and vicious. She howls wildly like a trapped animal, and Bob plays his cat and mouse game. Maddy's death reveals to audiences the answer to the iconic mystery of Laura Palmer. David Lynch believes this moment led to the inevitable death of the series. I understand his point, and as I was too young at the time, I cannot speak for audiences. But I don't know how much I agree that the show automatically had to end, or that Laura's was the only mystery keeping the show going until that moment. Now, I will say I had the entire series before me, so I didn't have to wait week to week to watch each episode. Perhaps the original hook of the series would now disappear, but I was just as invested in Donna's story, in Audrey's story. I will also say that up until that point, Maddy was my favorite character on the show, and the one I found to be the most interesting. So it wasn't so much about losing the mystery of Laura that I was upset about, or would make me lose interest in the show, as it would be losing Maddy. Still, Donna and Audrey and Shelley were my favorite other characters, so I would still be interested to continue. I believe that David Lynch was upset that his hand was forced. As he should be. It is his art. Lord knows that Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead brings up traumatic memories for me from my sophomore year of high school English. But one thing I will agree about from her work is that an artist should not be forced to be compromised. But in addition to that, a television series is typically a collaborative art, so compromise is always going to be an occurrence. I think that Lynch being upset, however, is a factor in why he distanced himself and the show took a decline. I do not know that I so much think, though, that it was a direct result of specifically revealing Laura's killer, like in general. I think it was the way Lynch was forced to do it. However, if the mystery had not been resolved and the show had been canceled, I personally would have been pretty upset. The show would probably not have stuck with me. Let me be clear. I do not in general enjoy cliffhangers. In fact, I think they are merely gimmicky as a way to force viewers to return. I think that if a show is good, then it will bring audiences back season after season without a gimmicky cliffhanger. But I will say that because the answer to Laura Palmer's mystery was resolved, I am pretty much fine with every other cliffhanger Lynch does now in any of his works. I love-hate the cliffhanger to the return. I think it is brilliant, but I of course want more. Again, just my opinion, but I think that the original or main idea or hook of a show should always have some sort of resolution. If that is achieved, then I'm pretty much fine with any other open-ended ideas remaining in a show. But I digress. I just felt that this does go hand in hand with Maddy, and it was my opportunity to express my own personal feelings on cliffhangers, and obviously this is an important moment to Twin Peaks, within the show's universe, as well as the series in general. So, Maddy has been killed, Leland Bob is finally caught, and their spirits are released. We will see Maddy, Leland, and Bob again on the show. Like I mentioned before, Maddy in particular ends up in the Black Lodge somehow, if only briefly. She warns Dale to watch out for her cousin. On the surface, I think this is supposed to reference Laura's doppelganger. I do not believe we get close enough to see if her eyes are the sort of offset, light bluish cataract eyes that indicate a doppelganger. She does not seem crazy intense as the other doppelgangers are, so I think it is just her regular self, or her regular lodge self anyway. However, I did come across this picture taken by Richard Beamer, who plays Ben Horne. The actor took still photos during the last episode of filming. In this picture, it appears that Sheryl Lee as Maddy is wearing the bluish-clear cataract contacts associated with a doppelganger. So which cousin of this Maddy are we to watch out for? Should we believe her? She then disappears, and that is the last we see of Maddy. 25 years later, this all changes because Dale Cooper went back in time to save the life of Maddy's cousin, Laura Palmer. Could this, in a way, be a part of the warning that Maddy was giving Dale? Not just to watch out in the season 2 finale, but to watch out for what sort of repercussions could happen if he saves Laura's life. For, as noble as this action is, saving Laura will have an inevitable ripple effect. By the end of the return, we as viewers only know a few, such as Pete finally going fishing, and that there are new residents in the Palmer house. I am of the sect that believe that at the end of episode 7 in The Return, you can see in the Double R diner that time is being altered right in front of us. The occupants in the diner are subtly changing from each angle. We only see a little bit of what happened after we know Cooper changed time. I'm sure that there are dozens and dozens of things that happened during the return highlighting the time change throughout the season, but we didn't know yet that time had been altered. From when we do know our first time through viewing, it is at night and Richard Cooper is driving with Carrie Page. But going all the way back to 1989, Laura has now gone missing instead of being murdered. We do not know if Maddy still went to console her aunt and uncle, but according to series co-creator Mark Frost in a Reddit interview, Maddy is still alive. It is possible that she still went to visit Twin Peaks, and because Bob had not killed Laura, he wasn't as tempted to kill Maddy. This might be tricky to explain. I feel like, from what I've read in general about serial killers, not that Bob is a serial killer per se, the first time can be the hardest, and then it becomes easier and easier. So, using that analogy, one can argue that Bob originally killed Maddy because she reminded him so much of his earlier kill, and then it would only get easier and easier. We know this because only a day or two later, he appeared geared up and easily ready to now attack Donna in the Palmer living room. I'm just generalizing a little, but you get the point. Or maybe Maddy just never visited Twin Peaks. She still has her life and apartment back in Montana. She would be in her early 50s, maybe married with her own kids, or single, or whatever. But I'm super curious to know and hope that if a season 4 ever happens, that we find out some specifics on Maddy. It is interesting to think and theorize about how she could impact the show. I mean, in the final moments of The Return, Carrie Page is realizing something. With David Lynch, it could really mean anything. Sure, it could just be a way to have an eternal cliffhanger mystery, but if we look at it more literally, Carrie is likely remembering that she is Laura Palmer. There is also the theory that she is the so-called literal missing page from Laura's diary. Or Carrie Page herself might be a tulpa. Tulpas were certainly a thematic trend in The Return, an idea that could change a lot because who knows who else was a tulpa. Either way, I would love to see a season 4 have Laura Carrie Page reach out to her cousin Maddy. Or there is the possibility that Maddy herself is a tulpa. At first, I wanted to reject this idea because I love Maddy. I want her to be exactly who she was as presented in the series. However, this could make a lot of sense. She is obviously identical to Laura. Their ages are different, but that could be based upon when exactly she was created, or told her age was. Perhaps she was a backup plan from the White Lodge in case, anything went wrong. Bob was drawn to her because she was described and portrayed as a good, decent, innocent. Bob killed her, so that plan failed, but it would explain how exactly she could end up in the Black Lodge when appearing to Dale. If she was created as a tulpa via the lodge spirits, then she would be able to flit back and forth. There are also the facts to consider from Dale Cooper's dream at the beginning of season 1. The man from another place shows him a spirit that looks just like Laura Palmer. He tells Dale that this is not Laura Palmer, but instead the man from another place's cousin that looks just like Laura Palmer. Just like Laura as a cousin that will soon appear looking just like her. Perhaps this is all the same person, Maddy, or Maddy the Tulpa, if you will. What do you all think about Maddy being a tulpa? I have mixed emotions. I mean, please remember though, whether or not she was originally or what was originally intended should not be a large factor. As Twin Peaks has revealed, anything can change and anything can be happening or going on. I think that it is entirely possible. I hope more that it's not true, but I can see how it fits. And if Maddy is not a tulpa, but Laura Palmer became somebody else, just like Dale became Richard, is it possible that Maddy has now become someone else as well? Or is it possible that Carrie Page is what Maddy evolved into? I mean, the only name that really sounded familiar to Carrie was Sarah Palmer. It would be likely that she would remember her aunt by her first name. I believe she was related by blood to Sarah, so it could explain a little why that's the only Twin Peaks name she would remember. Right now, I am still leaning on the idea that Carrie Page is somehow linked to the missing diary page and to Laura more than Maddy, but as I analyze this, I do think it is a possibility with lots of potential. Especially because of this interesting image of Maddy in a robe with what looks like a blue flower on it. One could even argue it is a print representation of a blue rose. I gasped when I saw this picture. I then headed over to Reddit and saw people discussing it. Some, of course, just dismissed it as a coincidence, but I don't know. I mean, Lynch becomes very influenced by things just kind of happening. I could very well see him not meaning anything by it initially and then coming up with it later in retrospect. I know that the names Maddy and Laura are evoked from older films, and I think it's possible that the Blue Rose term is as well, but it doesn't mean he didn't come back to link it later on. And it's Maddy in particular that is wearing the Blue Rose blue robe, which, write that out and you will see that only one letter needs to be changed in the sentence, Blue Rose blue robe. Interesting. Of course, it is very easy to look too closely or too deeply at something that really means nothing. But that's what the work of David Lynch does to us. We analyze every little detail. But that one in particular is very interesting. It's not like we're saying, oh, the way that lamp flickered over there is the secret to everything. It is a pivotal character wearing something that visually represents a very important something that would come up in Fire Walk with Me and go on to play a huge part in The Return. Come on, tell me what you think. I would also be curious as to how being Sarah Palmer's niece could affect everything surrounding Maddy. Obviously, there are a lot of theories surrounding Sarah Palmer as Judy. I don't think it's been officially confirmed, but I myself am leaning on that notion. If Bob was attracted to Maddy through Leland, I think it is entirely possible that Judy could also be attracted via Sarah Palmer. I mean, attracted in the sense that evil is attracted to good, so to speak, eternal balances, etc. Because of Bob abusing Laura led her to doing all these destructive things, she was at heart wanting to be good. And from what we know of Maddy, Maddy is a good person, or an agent of good. And certainly she was sacrificed by Bob as another innocent. So, if Maddy is alive now, would Judy also try to go after her? When Twin Peaks The Return listed Sheryl Lee as playing both Laura Palmer and Maddy, I was ecstatic. Again, it seems to have been dropped now from Wikipedia, but I know I read it once. I hoped that we would see some sort of update on Maddy in The Return again. I always thought she was somehow mixed in with the Laura doppelganger spirits in the Black Lodge, in particular the quote, beware of my cousin or look out for my cousin always intrigued me. And of course, I was happy to see some version of Laura, Maddy, Carrie, Page come alive again via the brilliant Sheryl Lee. I mean, no matter how you feel about the time change thing, getting to see Sheryl Lee play in a live character again was pretty awesome. I always loved the character of Maddy though. She was the first time we got to see Sheryl Lee really portray an alive character in the real world on Twin Peaks. And from the moment she entered Twin Peaks, there was an air of mystery about her, and I really felt for her when she became mixed up in the romance of James and Donna. She reignited the love triangle James and Donna were in with Laura, which is sort of a weird thing in and of itself. But there is so little that we really know of Maddy anyway. What were her interests? If she is alive now and Mark Frost seems to confirm this to be true, what is she doing? How does she factor into all that we saw in The Return? Were we given clues that have been somehow overlooked? That is of course possible. Was she a Tulpa all along? Does she have some bearing on Carrie Page's life? Or is she living a quiet life free of Bob and Judy in Missoula, Montana? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And thank you for watching another episode of 411 Pop Culture, where real people talk about really everything. I'm your host, Justin Steele. I would really love it if you enjoyed this video that you would give it a like or a thumbs up. And I really would love it if you would please consider subscribing to my channel. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you soon.